Avoidants are prone to self-numbing behaviors. These are their coping strategies. Rather than processing emotions, rather than dealing with stress, anxiety, insecurities, they prefer to numb, to self-medicate, sometimes with substance, sometimes without. Plus, these coping mechanisms also have the added benefit to the avoidant of creating emotional distance between themselves and their partner. Now, avoidants avoid. These are people that grew up with consistent childhood emotional neglect, growing up in households where you don't talk about feelings, where they weren't really given love and nurturing, and they had their own feelings dismissed and rejected. If you had negative emotions, it wasn't welcome. Go be sad in your room. Nobody wants to see it. Growing up in households where their basic needs were met, but their emotional needs were not. The end result is a person that had to figure it out on their own. They learned to stuff it, to put on a happy face because their feelings weren't welcome growing up. They also personalized that lack of love and nurturing growing up to feel defective, broken, unlovable, worthless. But since they have no process to deal with negative emotions, what they do is they find things to distract themselves and self-numb, things to provide a dopamine rush. Dopamine is that feel-good hormone that goes off when you're happy or engaged in fun activities or in a relationship. They look to numb, they look to suppress. But these behaviors can also interfere with the relationship because emotional closeness feels unsafe to them. As a child, they learned that if you get too close to anybody, like your parents or caretakers, you're going to get rejected, disappointed, or perhaps even abandoned. Plus, that low self-esteem, that lack of self-worth, that's why they put the walls up, because their fear is if my partner gets on the other side of my wall, they're going to figure me out and I will be exposed as defective, broken, and unlovable. So getting close feels unsafe because closeness they subconsciously associate with rejection and abandonment. So emotional distance feels safe. They feel like they're out of harm's way as long as their partner is at an emotional arm's length or even further. So what are these coping strategies? It can vary from avoidant to avoidant, but a big one, alcohol. Alcohol, it numbs, it self-medicates. Plus, many avoidants will actually rely on alcohol to even be able to express any emotions whatsoever. Many of them are heavy drinkers, many are alcoholics. It gives them the dopamine effect, it medicates, and yes, drinking can absolutely interfere with the relationship. Another one, video games. There's nothing inherently wrong with gaming. The video games themselves are fine. But the thing is, a severe avoidant attacher is likely to prioritize video games over time with their partner. It numbs them out. They zone out. They get the dopamine, the thrill from the game. Plus, when they're constantly gaming, that's less time they have to spend with their partner, which means less emotional intimacy. Now, any kind of hobby. Hobbies are inherently a good thing, but if they're done in moderation. An avoidant will typically prioritize a hobby over time with their partner. Always busy, busy, busy with the hobby, never having time for the partner. The hobby provides them that dopamine, helps them feel good. It distracts them so they don't have to think about the negative emotions they don't want to face. And it helps create emotional distance. Other addictive behaviors, such as gambling, adult content addiction. Those things give them that dopamine rush, helps them feel better about themselves. The activity is distracting. And yes, it absolutely creates emotional distance between themselves and their partner. When you're going out recklessly spending money, well, it's hard to really build intimacy while you're doing that. And for adult content, it's really hard to build intimacy with your partner when you are essentially lusting after somebody else in secret behind their back. It creates emotional distance, even if their partner isn't aware that that distance is being created. Social media, that is another way that an avoidant can numb out and also create distance. When they're constantly on Facebook, they're constantly on TikTok, Instagram, they're just constantly scrolling and liking and posting. It's keeping them distracted, it's giving them that dopamine, and they're spending more emotional time with the social media than they are their partner. It's all about what they prioritize, and they will typically prioritize these addictive behaviors, these coping mechanisms over their partner to create that distance, to make sure that emotional intimacy doesn't build too much. And they also numb out, get that dopamine, distract themselves from those negative emotions, and just cope that way. But in reality, that's not actual coping because all that anxiety, all that depression, that stress, all the low self esteem related issues, the insecurities, the pain, they are all still simmering below the surface. They're just suppressing them, burying them, numbing them, suppressing them, burying. And what happens is this can lead to an overall feeling of chronic depression. But due to a lack of self reflection, because severe avoidants struggle with self reflection, especially dismissive avoidance and fearful avoidance that lean heavily dismissive, those emotions haven't been processed, so they can just lead to that general feeling of not feeling good about yourself, just feeling down, feeling depressed, but they often don't know why. They don't know why because of that lack of self-reflection. So, coping mechanisms to numb out may help them feel better in the moment, but it really doesn't actually help them feel better in the long run at all, and it self-sabotages relationships. So if you're in a relationship with an avoidant partner or your avoidant ex, and they prioritize things like video games, hobbies, work, or even more maladaptive things like drinking, gambling, if they did all that kind of stuff and prioritized it over you, it's not because you did anything wrong, especially if you were a consistent, loving partner that showed up for them. It's because they were afraid of creating intimacy with you, and they have no process, no healthy process to deal with negative emotions and stress. It's a reflection of them. It's a reflection of their insecurities, their lack of emotional availability, their lack of self-awareness. And yes, it's a reflection of their character too, because these behaviors are still choices. This is a grown person. They have free will. They have the ability to make choices, and this is what they're choosing. But don't personalize it because it's not a reflection of your self-worth. It's not a reflection of the quality of a partner that you are. It's a reflection of them.